こんにちは。今日のスピーキングを始めます。The changing style of the Plains Indians. When the first Europeans arrived in the Great Plains of North America, they found Aboriginal cultures that were agriculturally oriented. The daily routine of the Indians centered on the subsistence cultivation of corn, beans, and squash. About once a year, the tribe went on a major bison hunt to supplement their vegetable diet and to obtain hide, sinew, bone, and other raw materials. Hunting did not occupy much of their time. The Indians obtained the first horses after the Spaniards settled New Mexico in 1598. By 1800, the use of the horse had spread throughout the tribes of the Great Plains. The mobility offered by the horse resulted in the convergence of diverse Aboriginal groups onto the plain to take advantage of the material wealth afforded by hunting the great bison horse. Within 100 years of the introduction of the horse, the Indian population of the plains had tripled to an estimated 115,000. A new way of life was established, one dependent upon following bison herds. Thus, subsistence agriculture was largely abandoned, and Aboriginals of the plains became nomadic hunters. Gardening simply was not as profitable as hunting. The third president, in an effort to restore a balance of Republicans in government office, Jefferson started what came to be known as a spoils system. He tried in vain to control the Supreme Court in the interest of the will of the people. He negotiated the purchase of the vast Louisiana territory on doubtful constitutional grounds. Jefferson also launched the Lewis and Clark expedition. He was responsible for the fighting of our first war as a nation on the shores of Tripoli against the Barbary pirates. His effort to prevent a second war with England only postponed it until 1812. Jefferson was slow but successful in meeting the first real threat to the new American Union. Aaron Burr was accused of making a treasonable effort to set up an independent government in the Southwest. This was halted when it had scarcely begun. However, in the trials that followed the suppression of this Burr conspiracy, Jefferson's personal animosity toward Burr and toward Chief Justice John Marshall did him little credit. His Embargo Act was a daring and original, but eventually unsuccessful, means of keeping the peace. However, it have been one of the most successful and inspired diplomatic moves of the young republic. In effect, it applied economic pressures against Britain and France, who were at war with each other. It was Jefferson's answer to British orders in council and the Impressment Acts directed against neutral, in this case mainly American shipping. The Embargo Act stopped American shipping, thus in turn depriving European nations of some of the raw materials needed for war. Confederate States of America. Between December 20th, 1860s and February 1st, 1861, 6 southern states declared their withdrawal, secession, from the United States. On February 4th, at Montgomery, Alabama, they organized a separate and independent government called the Confederate States of America. The states that set up this government were South Carolina, Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, and Louisiana. A seventh state, Texas, was admitted to Confederation on March 2nd. Jefferson Davis of Mississippi was elected president and Alexander H. Stephens of Georgia vice president. The preamble of the new Confederate Constitution declared that each state was acting in its sovereign and independent character. This right had been asserted at earlier periods in American history. Never before, however, has the issue been charged with the emotional factor of the abolition of black slavery. The Constitution of the Confederate States reflected the then prevailing belief in the South that slavery was the only practicable status for the large black population of that section. It forbade any legislation impairing the institution of slavery, though it did prohibit foreign slave trade. The remainder of the Constitution was largely based on that of the Union, from which the states of the lower South were withdrawing. Among the modifications was a 6-year term for president, who could not succeed himself. The president was in addition given the right to veto separate items of appropriation bills. Congress was prohibited from adopting a protective tariff on imports. The Civil War era. By the end of the 1850s, the North feared complete control of the nation by slave-holding interests of the white. South believed that the North was determined to destroy its way of life. White Southerners have been embittered by Northern defiance of the 1850 Federal Fugitive Slave Act and have been alarmed in 1859 by the raid at Harper's Ferry, West Virginia, led by the white abolitionist John Brown. After Abraham Lincoln was elected president in 1860 on the anti-slavery platform of the new Republican Party, the Southern states seceded from the Union and formed the Confederacy. The Civil War, which liberated the nation's slaves, began in 1861, but preservation of the Union, not the abolition of slavery, was the initial objective of President Lincoln. Lincoln believed in gradual emancipation, with the federal government compensating the slaveholders for the loss of their property. But in September 1862, he issued the Emancipation Proclamation, declaring that all slaves residing in states in rebellion against the United States as of January 1st, 1863, were to be free. Thus, the Civil War became in effect a war to end slavery. Black leaders such as the author William Well Brown, the physician Martin R. Delaney, and Douglas vigorously recruited blacks into the Union. Armed forces Douglas declared in the North Star, who would be themselves, must strike the blow. By the end of the Civil War, more than 186,000 black men were in the Union Army. They performed heroically, despite discrimination in pay, rations, equipment, and assignments, and the unrelenting hostility of the Confederate troops. The Great Depression. On October 24th, 1929, the complete collapse of the stock market began. About 30 million shares of stock were sold. Tuesday, October 29th, notable since as Black Tuesday, extended the damage. More than 16 million shares were sold. The value of most shares fell sharply, leaving financial ruin and panic in its wake. There have been financial panics before and there have been some since, but never did a collapse in the market have such a devastating and long-term effect. Like a snowball rolling downhill, it gathered momentum and swept away the whole economy before it. Businesses closed, putting millions out of work. Banks failed by the hundred. Wages for those still fortunate enough to have work fell precipitously. The value of money decreased as the demand for goods declined. Most of the agricultural segment of the economy have been in serious trouble for years. With the arrival of the Depression, it was nearly eliminated altogether, and the drought that created the 1930s Great Plains Dust Bowl compounded the damage. The government itself was sorely pressed for income at all levels as tax revenues fell, and the government at that time was much more limited in its ability to respond to economic crisis than it is today. The international structure of world trade crafts, and each nation sought to protect its own industrial base by imposing high tariffs on imported goods. This only made matters worse. 終わり。